Hello, and welcome to The Season, the podcast from FYC It that goes behind the scenes of awards season. I'm your host, FYC It founder Ryland Aldridge. The Season is a nuts and bolts conversation about the machinery that is the awards world. This week, we've got a fascinating chat for you with Emmy and VES Award-winning VFX supervisor Eric Durst. Eric brings a wealth of knowledge about the VFX world from a career packed with high-profile projects and his time working with visionary directors like Bong Joon-ho, Ron Howard, and Alex Proyas. I hope you'll stay tuned for that. But first, a few headlines from the awards calendar. We're really getting into screening season now, with many of the big contenders rolling out for both public audiences and FYC screenings. Sean Baker's Palme d'Or winner and Best Picture frontrunner Anora opened in specialty release this past weekend, racking up this year's highest box office per-screen average of $90,000 per screen. Meanwhile, the first voters and press got a chance to see Gladiator 2 over the weekend, and the buzz from the room was very positive about its chances to be a major player this season. Focus announced the first few FYC screenings for Morgan Neville's animated Pharrell documentary, Piece by Piece, and screenings continue to be announced for contenders Emilia Perez, A Real Pain, and Nickel Boys. This is definitely the calm before the storm, as we expect to see a slew of screenings rolling out in the next few weeks. Looking back at historical data, this same week last year saw studios add 55 screenings, while the week of Halloween 2023 saw a whopping 160 screenings added to the calendar in that week alone. In other awards news, it was announced that Angelina Jolie will receive the Molten Modern Master Award at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival in February. This is linked to her leading role in Netflix's Pablo Larraín film Maria. It's probably worth mentioning that the last two recipients of the award, Robert Downey Jr. and Jamie Lee Curtis, went on to win their respective Oscars. Lastly, what we can confidently call the final awards for Emmy season 2024 have been announced. The Sentinel Awards, which are presented by Hollywood Health and Society at the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center, recognize writers of, quote, some of the best and most challenging TV entertainment of the past year that made a difference in viewers' lives. Winners include the writers of The Morning Show, Hacks, Gen V, Expats, Grey's Anatomy, and more. Do you have news for us or anything you'd like to hear us discuss on the season? Send us an email at podcast@fycit.app or hit us up on our socials at FYCIT And remember to check out the app for the latest screenings and events. You can download and sign up for our newsletter at fycit.app. Now on to our conversation with Eric Durst. Today's guest is Eric Durst, an Emmy-winning visual effects supervisor who has worked on some of the most memorable projects in film and television. He was first nominated for a VES Award for Outstanding Visual Effects in a Commercial in 2005, but even before that, he was a VFX supervisor on such visually stunning films as Batman Forever, End of Days, and Syriana. He worked with Bong Joon-ho on his visual masterpiece Snowpiercer and was nominated for an Emmy for the Ron Howard series Genius Einstein. More recently, Eric won both a VES Award and the Emmy for the Apple TV Plus series 5 Days at Memorial. Whether he's building entire worlds from scratch or tackling real-world disasters, Eric has an incredible talent for blending art and technology on screen, something the VFX Awards voters have certainly taken note of. So Eric, how's your season?
Very good. Thank you. It's interesting. It's just starting for me in terms of the Academy season. I'm seeing a number of films this week. And I was in India for a good portion of the year, so I missed, unfortunately, the Emmy season. But I'm looking forward to this year's Academy season. And I'm seeing Conclave with Ed Berger and The Outrun with Saoirse Ronan. Two people that I had the honor to work with and on films. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing them and seeing their work.
That's great. Yeah, it's starting to heat up a little bit. The screenings are certainly starting to come thick and fast now.
That's right.
So Eric, you won an Emmy last January for 5 Days of Memorial, but you were nominated for that Emmy back in July. How was the extended period of suspense waiting for the strikes to end?
Yeah, it's interesting because you spend a lot of time doing the preparation, and we spent an enormous amount of time crafting the presentation so it told a story. And so there's a lot of work going into it, and then you submit it, and then it's like you've done your work, and it's up to everyone else. And so it was a bit painstaking waiting that long, but there's nothing you can do, and you sort of resign yourself and say, well, it'll either happen or not, and one day it will come. So that's where we are.
Of course, you also won the VES Award for 5 Days of Memorial a full 11 months before the Emmys.
Yeah, right.
Well, did it feel like award season was just a sort of different beast last year?
Yes, it was. You get into a cadence, you get into momentum, and things happen at certain timely events like a clock. And then when that gets broken, everything sort of fractures and then it becomes compressed at the other end. And so that's where we are now. The presentations you do in visual effects are probably different than other categories. For instance, you have these very strong visuals that you present. And oftentimes in a presentation, you're stringing these shots together and they're very abrupt cuts between them. And so you get a presentation that is beautiful work, but rhythmically it stops and starts and stops and starts. So fortunately, with 5 Days of Memorial, we were doing the best one of the episodes. And so we looked at a number of the episodes that we had, and a lot of them just didn't cut together well. But episode 2, which was fortunately where we had the largest shot, that's where the lower ninth ward is just wiped out by the levees breaking. And we put those together. And fortunately, when you put the shots together, it told a very coherent and emotional story. And I think that really helped the presentation. And I would say in the future, if I'm doing additional shows, I would even sacrifice a great shot for the rhythm of the presentation and making sure it tells a story.
That's interesting. Let's talk about that submission process a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think VES is known as having one of the more rigorous submission processes. And then, of course, you've got to make reels for the Emmys as well. What's your process like when it comes to those kinds of materials?
Well, I think with the VES, it's a little different. You can do all the shots and you don't have to go in shot order or as broadcast. And the Emmys, you have to show everything in the order that it was shown in the episode. In the VES, you can switch them around. So in terms of the storytelling process, you can bunch things up and you have more ability to edit. And even though it's a very rigorous process, but I think it's more rigorous in the Emmys just because of that fact.
So going back a little bit, I mentioned that your first major nomination was in 2005, but before that, do you remember the first project you were involved with that had a real awards campaign for visual effects?
Well, I did one that should have had a campaign but didn't. I guess we'll start there. I did a show, an Arnold Schwarzenegger show in 2000 called End of Days. I felt like we didn't have the backing of the studio, so we really didn't get in there and we weren't able to get into the Bake-Off. And then I went to the Bake-Off, and so I saw a few shows that I realized we could have easily have been in there. And I think a lot of it was my naivete because I hadn't been in the film business in that level for a long time, and I didn't really know the politics of it. I didn't know that the Academy has a group in the visual effects branch that votes on shows that are being considered. Let's say it's maybe 25. And then of those, that's the short list, and then becomes a shorter list as you keep going. So I think I kicked myself a little bit for not knowing the rules of the game and just how it was played. I realized that we could have been, at least in the Bake-Off, and we should have been. And I was wondering why. First of all, saying, oh, well, no one, the studio didn't give us the right support. But then I realized, well, really, it isn't up to the studio. It's up to you as a supervisor to do that because it's your branch, your work. And even though you will get the support of the studio, they need to be prompted to do that.
Do you remember your first experience on stage at a Bake-Off going through that?
Yes, I do. The first time was Batman Forever. And it was with John Dykstra. And John Dykstra is a sort of a legend in the visual effects world. He's the guy who really started me in filmmaking. I was doing commercials at that point in time, had a background in animation, was doing commercials and some features, but really just on the facility side. And that was in the early days. This was like 1994, I believe. And since I was doing commercials, actually John Dykstra was doing commercials at Apogee in Van Nuys, which is the original ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. Is where they did the first Star Awards. And so I was hired to join John and be part of their commercial division. And so we did commercials for a number of years together. And I had lunch with John because I was asking him, how do I get into features from commercials? And so he said, well, why don't you come over and you can do all of Gotham City? And that was a pretty great entrance into the film world. So I did that. And we were in the Bake-Off, actually 2 years, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. And so that was the first time I got to speak in front of the Academy and make the case.
So obviously, VFX technology has evolved quite a bit over those years. Has the award side of things changed as well? Do you see campaigning in a different way?
Sure. I think, first of all, the Bake-Off used to be, and this is where, for those who don't know, this is where they have the top 10 films to be considered for the nomination, of which are 5. There used to be 3, actually, at a number of years ago. Only 3 of the 10 got to be in the nomination. And it was like everyone would go up and talk and tell about the film, and there was a light in front of you. And when you reached your 5 minutes, the light would come on and you had to stop and then show your work. And at that point, you could not show behind the scenes films because you used to be able to in the earlier days. But what happened is that this was pre-digital, essentially. So a lot of the studios could put the money in to make an actual presentable breakdown of the before and afters and show how everything was made. But those with a more humble budget could not do that. And so it was deemed that that was not fair. So they cut out all the before and afters. And it was a little awkward because great visual effects work is work that you often can't even tell what happened. It's like a magic trick. It's invisible. And so you would have voiceovers that people would try to prime you on what you're about to see, and then you'd see it, but it was an awkward way to present it. But now you can have the before and afters, and it's very well put together where you have a panel and you basically go up and present your film. You show the before and afters and the how it's done. And then there's a group of the board of governors and yourself and very focused questions on the work. And that goes very smoothly. And also the ability to stream it, because in the earlier days, you had to be present at the Motion Picture Academy to vote. So you would see the 10 entries, and then you had like 15 minutes or 20 minutes to vote. And you were sort of exhausted because of the long evening. It's about a 3.5 hour, 4 hour, possibly evening. And so you're so exhausted, you barely can remember what the first film was and all this. And now you can go back and review them. So I think it's much improved.
Do you think that particular process favors a certain kind of film or a certain kind of VFX style? I think that, 5 Days of Memorial is perhaps not on paper what you would think of as a big VFX heavy thing, yet it was such an incredible work with real environments and things like that. Do those typically not do as well as the big VFX heavy because of that process?
It's surprising. There is, in a way, there's a bias towards realism, and you get films that are very big blockbusters and have massive effects and all of this, and people just sort of get overpowered by that. It's just so much. And I think people like to see invisible work that's very organic and visceral. And I particularly love that kind of work. I mean, the biggest compliment is where you say you worked on a film in visual effects and they don't even know there are visual effects. Right. And then when you show the before and after, they say, oh my God, I had no idea. And so that's a big compliment. It is a magic trick.
Does that ever play into your decision-making when deciding to take on a project? Not necessarily specifically that it would be an awards project, but that the work is the kind of work that might not immediately be thought of as being a big flashy VFX kind of thing?
Well, I've done all kinds. I mean, I've done big blockbuster films that are obviously huge VFX shows, and then those that are invisible. And I find that those that are on the invisible, more organic side are just more theatrical. They're more stories, and they aren't distracted. Maybe distracted is the wrong word, but it's more grounded. I've worked with some incredible directors and seen their process. We can talk about Bong Joon-ho. He's just amazing. And it was a great privilege to work with him and other directors throughout this entire process, because you really get to see the whole thing. And after the circus has left the town, as we say, as all the 300, 400, 500 people who are on the crew have left, it's just you, the director, the editor, essentially, and then executive producer who comes in and out. But it's really sort of the three of you looking at the film and deciding how it goes. And so you really get a chance to know the directors, know how they work, and also have a big impact in the film itself.
Yeah, the list of directors you've worked with is truly incredible. You mentioned Bong Joon-ho, also Alex Proyas, John Woo, James Mangold, Ron Howard. Do you tailor your process to the particular director that you're working with? Has that changed quite a bit?
I don't think so. I think everybody wants somebody who's calm and knows what to do and are confident. And so I try to work on that, like really being as prepared as possible, understanding what the options are and understanding how to explain it. Even to someone who is very versed in visual effects, your presentation skills are everything. Especially in the early stages, we call it the teenage stage. This teenage stage where you have pimples and not looking quite right, and then all of a sudden the skin clears and you look great. And so it's that awkward stage where shots are like that, where they don't look very good, but they're going to look good. And how do you present a shot that doesn't look good to someone that is going to get freaked out? And so you have to focus, tell them exactly what you're looking at and present it in a way that it doesn't disrupt the whole process. So I don't craft it to an individual. I just craft it to knowing your stuff and being able to present it and educate as well as possible.
You mentioned working on all kinds of different projects. And of course, Snowpiercer by Bong Joon-ho is perhaps a little bit more on the visually stylistic side. Talk a little bit about working with Bong and what it was like working on such an incredible film that, of course, is grounded in character and story as well, but with really stunning visuals.
It was a remarkable thing. And like everything, things happen. It feels like a fluke at the time where it's just, I was having lunch with a friend of mine, Karen Joy, who's a visual effects producer. And we had lunch and then she was leaving and she said, "Oh, by the way, I just heard about this project that some Korean guys are doing. Would you be interested in this?" And I said, "Of course," not knowing who it was. And then all of a sudden had lunch with Bong and Do-ho Choi, who is longtime producer. And we just had a great time and I showed him the work and that was it. And then things evolved from there. And next thing you know, you're in Prague shooting this incredible film. And it was really a Hollywood film without Hollywood because at that point, there's no Hollywood money at all. It was all from Korea and it was self-financed. And they had at that point only half the money. It was like build it and they will come kind of philosophy. So we only had half the money, but they were going full out. Eventually, we got to a point where we needed the extra half and we were able to get it, but it was very gutsy. And they wanted to have Hollywood actors in this. So it had that international feel. Chris Evans came down. Actually, my understanding of the story is he was very interested in being an independent actor as well as, Captain America. And he flew down himself to LA when Bong was here and talked to him, auditioned and got the part as the lead. And then, John Hurt and Tilda Swinton and everyone just sort of rolled in from there. And all of a sudden it was an avalanche of these incredible actors. And I think a lot of it was that they loved Bong. I mean, Bong is incredibly prepared. He has spent 3 years on this, researching it in and out. And one thing that's really unique about Bong is that he is very open, incredibly open to any suggestions you may have, yet he has absolute power and he controls everything. But you ask him a question and he very respectfully considers what your question is and will answer it extremely articulately because he's already thought of it. However, he's looked at every angle, every possibility, every way of looking at approaching this. And also he was doing it in his second language, which is English, not Korean. And so he would talk in English every day, and you could see it was laborious. It was sort of hard to do it. There was some friction on that. And then when we got into post-production, he just gave that up, and he would speak nothing but Korean. and Joon-ho, his producer, would be the translator. And it was sort of like, I've had enough of speaking English. I'm done,
Magnificent film. Was there much of a campaign for that? Did you have any conversations about putting together reels for that as well?
Well, that's an interesting story as well. So it was finished. I was both supervisor and producer, visual effects producer on that. And because Bong is so clear with how he wants shots to be, I could go to the visual effects houses and say, often, I know you have a big pad because directors tend to like change their mind and everything gets lost and you lose money and all this. Bong is a different animal. He is somebody who will tell you exactly what he wants and stick very close to that because he's thought about this for so long. And so we're able to reduce the budget, and we came in about $800,000 under budget, which was incredible for a very low budget film. But that gave us money to finish the show. Originally, it was going to be finished in Korea, but we were able to come to LA and finish it here, the sound and the mix and everything. And there was no distributor at that point. And so they knew they had to get a distributor. So they went to the American Film Mart, and Harvey Weinstein, he liked the film and bought it. And he said, okay, the deal was struck where you get $25 million and Harvey Weinstein gets 3 chances to change the film. And he had a lot of ideas about how it should be. It should be like this climactic ending. It should be a roller coaster ride, this kind of thing. It's not that film. Really, the second act is sort of where everything peaks. And in the third act, everything sort of resolves itself. A very different structure. So Bong, in his infinite wisdom, finished the film completely. Sound mix, DI, everything is done. And then he gave it to the Weinstein company to do their 3 at-bats. And the first request was, it's too long. So he did the thing by like losing 5 frames in every shot, and then it ended up being 20 minutes. So that was no good. And the second one was something else and something else. And they could never make it work because he had shot so little film. It was a jigsaw puzzle with only those jigsaw pieces in place. And there's only one way to put it together. No alternative. And Bong knew that. And so in the end, they had a screening, Bong's film and Harvey Weinstein's film. Harvey Weinstein's film tanked. Bong's film went through the roof. It pissed Harvey Weinstein off. And he said it was going to be at 2,500 markets in theaters. And that's out. It's all just going to go straight to video. And so it went on iTunes at that point, before Apple TV. It was iTunes. And it was number 1 on iTunes for like the first month. And it was in theaters, but you could only see it in Koreatown. You could see it in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I grew up, at the local theater there, but you couldn't see it in Los Angeles because Landmark and AMC and all these big chains said, whoa, we're not going to like have this situation where you're putting it online and trying to do it in the theater at the same time. This just doesn't work. And so it was one of the first films to really do that sort of double presentation system. And so it never got into the Oscar process because it didn't have the momentum. It became a cult classic at this point, but that's the story.
Wow, what a shame.
It could have been a big movie in 2,500 theaters is quite an opening.
Sure. And with that marketing muscle and awards muscle of Harvey too. So you mentioned that you are going to screenings. It's Oscar season again. When you head to all these FYC screenings and try to see all the movies, are you bringing the VFX voter perspective with you? Are you looking specifically at that, or do you just really like to see everything that's out there?
I'm looking at it as a film. And certainly you always have your VFX perspective eyes on it. And you always look at those in tandem with observing the film. But I love the the FYC process so much, especially being in Los Angeles. Having been in other countries and traveling a lot, it's bleak. Everything's happening here. And so you get to meet the directors and filmmakers and have great talks and talk to other Academy members and things like that. So it deepens your appreciation of the film. So I just love going to them and seeing the film and having the extra bonus of meeting the people who made it and having questions if you have questions, or at least hearing what they have to say. And I think it really deepens the process enormously.
That's great. Well, we actually like to end each of our interviews with some lightning round questions about the awards world. Are you down for that?
Okay. All right.
What is your favorite awards show to attend?
I like the Emmy Awards, actually, the TV Emmy Awards. I think with television, you get to know a lot of the people better. And I knew a lot of people, more people, I guess, who are in the mix in that. So that's been my favorite so far.
Do you attend film festivals? If so, what's your favorite film festival to attend?
I have not been attending film festivals. I haven't had the time to do it. Although I did the Sydney Film Festival. I was in Sydney for 3 years, and so I got to attend that a couple of times, and that was great.
Do you prefer Emmy season or Oscar season?
Honestly, Oscar season, I think, because it's the food, but it's great food, and they have great receptions. There's some great venues, and I think also just the capacity, the number of people who attend those. It's usually a smaller group, and then you get a better chance to meet with the creators of the film, and there's more intimate conversation. And so in that way, I really do like the Oscar events.
What is your favorite past appetizer at a screening reception?
Past appetizer. Boy, I'm fixating on this lobster roll that I forget where it was. It could have been at the Ross House. They have fabulous food there. It's just this sort of lobster roll that had this incredible taste to it. And I ate a number of those, but there are a lot of them to choose from. So it's quite a spread.
Do you have a favorite Oscar host?
Johnny Carson used to host that years ago. So he was pretty magnificent. But Jimmy Kimmel, I think, has done a great job with that. You need to be raw at the right time, at the right tonality of it, and be humorous and lightness. And he just has a good balance of all those things.
Do you have a least favorite awards speech cliche?
Least favorite. I think it's a general one where you go in and you start crying and you talk about your family and your parents and you were born and you're a baby and you're all your elementary school friends and all that, and then beef, and it's over. And disregarding the people that worked on it with you and gave you that award itself.
At an award show, do you prefer theater or table seating?
I like the tables. I think it's more intimate, so I would pick tables.
Would you be more likely to cry or to swear during an acceptance speech?
Oh, cry for sure. Although that's what you would see. In my head, I could probably swear.
Do you have a post-award season ritual?
Yeah, sometimes I revisit some of the work that has been awarded or nominated. I oftentimes have seen the film or the series many months ago. So after the awards are happening and let's say it's gotten an award or at least has been mentioned, I go back and view them again. So I like that as a reminder of the good work that's done that year.
This might be a softball for someone who works in a visual medium, but do you prefer to watch FYC screenings at home or in the theater?
Oh, in the theater for sure.
All right, final question for you, Eric. What is one unreasonably early award season prediction that you're willing to make?
Oh, it's too early. First of all, I've been out of the country, so I can give you Indian films, but I can't give you these films. So I'm going to have to pass on that. I can give you an answer in a couple of months.
Sounds good.
I'll text you.
Thanks so much, Eric. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
We're back, and I'm here once again with our FYC at field agent, Tony Miros, our very own FYC event junkie. Tony has been phoning in each week from the awards circuit to give us his firsthand account of all the goings-on in screening world. Tony, what'd you see this week?
I'm telling you, Ryland, they're now throwing everything in the kitchen sink at us because I guess they're feeling now the pressure. I got to see a really terrific film last week at the DGA. It's called Blitz by director, writer, producer Steve McQueen from 12 Years a Slave. Again, with Saoirse Ronan. My goodness, this girl's everywhere. and a newcomer, an actor, Elliot Pfeffernan. But this was like at the DGA at the big theater, the number one theater. So it was filled to capacity. Everybody was excited to see it. And it's about a single woman and her son. They get separated during the Blitzkrieg and what he goes through. So it's fascinating. And then they had a Q&A afterwards, very informative and lively. And it was with Steve McQueen. It was with Saoirse Ronan and Elliot Pfeffernan. And you could tell that they had a great time doing the film because they were all laughing. I like it when, we like serious films, but we like it when they come out and they start giggling and laughing and telling us funny stories. One story they told us, which I thought was hilarious and everybody else did, was that Elliot Pfeffernan, when he was hired, was 8 years old. He had no idea who Steve McQueen was or even Saoirse Ronan. He even said it. He goes, I had no idea. My sister had seen Little Women, but I had never watched any of her movies. And everybody started laughing, including Mr. McQueen and Saoirse. So, it was really fun. And he's such a good little actor. When you watch him, you're like, I can't believe he's never done this before. He did one school play, Ryland. That's it. And now he's in this big, huge, over the top, special effects film, which, by the way, when you watch it, the flooding scene in the London Underground, they talked about it. It took 3 days to film. It was all done on a practical set, so not very much CGI. And he did his own stunt work, this little kid. So I just had a great time that day.
Sounds like this is one to make sure you see on the big screen.
Oh, yeah. No, don't wait for it for a screener or, putting it on your computer because you're not going to get the full effect. And they did a fantastic job of trying to recreate the 1940s and London, and everything was just, it's a really interesting, great film. And I'm hoping that they go far in the award season this year.
Did they have any kind of reception or any kind of party afterwards?
You know what's funny? There was another screening in the smaller theater and they had a reception. So when we all got into the lobby, everybody's looking at themselves going, oh, is this for us? Is this for us? And it wasn't for us. So unfortunately, we didn't get any snacks. The other people did.
What else did you get up to this week?
So I went to the AMC 16 theater in Burbank, which I hardly ever go to. Not that I don't want to, but it's a big theater and I never go to those kind of multiplexes, to go see a screening of Night Bitch with Amy Adams. It's released by Searchlight Pictures. It premiered at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. And it's a very, shall we say, fascinating and interesting and kind of wacky film. It's about a woman, a stay-at-home mom, who sometimes transforms into a dog. Literally into a dog. So you got to go in with an open mind. You got to kind of figure out what they're saying to you. All the performances are really terrific. Amy Adams, of course, as you know, she has 2 Golden Globe Awards, nominated for 6 Academy Awards. The list goes on and on. So she's fantastic. And I'm sure she's going to be one of the people that we're going to look at to see if she gets a Best Actress nomination this year.
So that was at the AMC Burbank. How do you compare, say, going to see an FYC screening at one of the multiplexes versus like a screening room like the DGA?
Well, interesting you should ask, because they're a little different. Usually when you go to the big multiplexes, you don't know where they're going to be checking you in, because it's not like when you go to, wherever. If you go to Sony or you go to the DGA, it's right there. So you have to look for the unmarked table. Sometimes it's in the lobby. In our case, the other day was at the theater doors right outside, so you could see them. And then the private screening rooms, you can't bring food or drinks unless it's bottled water, of course. I get it. They don't want to clean up your mess. And so the good thing about going to a public movie theater is you get to have your popcorn and your drinks and all that, and the snacks. But it's a bigger treat when you get to the movie theater and they have free popcorn and drinks for you when you arrived. So I don't know about you guys, but I always get excited when I see free popcorn. I love popcorn. So yeah, that's the kind of little nuances of each thing. But I'm hoping that we get some more free popcorn this year, Ryland.
So what about Night Bitch? Did the Searchlight people shell out for free popcorn for that one?
Nope. No free popcorn for that one. Unfortunately.
So, Tony, what are your power rankings for kinds of screenings? Would you prefer, obviously, a big red carpet with a big reception? Would you prefer to have a Q&A or just straight into the reception, all the way down to just a great screening room with none of the bells and whistles?
Yeah, it depends on the film. Like if you have like a Meryl Streep film or something like that, where you're going to hear absolutely beyond talented people speaking, I'm so in it for the Q&A. You know what I mean? I don't have to have the bells and whistles. I don't have to have the free food. It's nice. But when you have talent that's that huge that you want to just listen to and hear what they had to say about the production, that's what I'm in for. But again, if we don't have a Q&A, throw me some free popcorn, guys. I mean, I just want something to snack on.
Well, one good thing about going to a screening at a multiplex is if you don't like the movie, maybe you just duck out and go see something else that's playing.
Were you one of those kids who your parents would leave you at the movie theater and you'd go to each movie?
No, we don't recommend doing that. Can't believe you would suggest that, Tony. All right, Tony, what's on your calendar for the next week?
Well, we have some other interesting things. I know Netflix is pushing, there's a screening of Emilia Perez with Zoe Saldana. And I think that's with the writer-director. And then there's Better Man, which is the biographical film about the British pop singer Robbie Williams, although I think he's played by a CGI monkey. So again, people turning into animals might be a theme this year. I don't know. But so far, that's what I'm guessing.
2 movies that also played at Telluride when I was there. So I'm interested to hear what you had to say about those ones, Tony. So thank you very much. We look forward to having you back next week.
Thanks, Ryland. See you next week.
Thank you to Tony Miros, our FYC at Field Agent, and another big thanks to our guest this week, Eric Durst. We'd love to hear what you think about the season. Leave us a review on your podcast app or drop us a line at podcast@fycit.app. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Don't forget to follow us on social media at FYCIT.app, and be sure to visit our website, fycit.app, where you can sign up for our newsletter, download FYCIT, and stay up to date on all things award season. Thanks again for listening. Please join us again next week for a new episode of The Season as we explore more of the stories behind the awards. Until then, remember, at FYCIT, award season starts here.